Okay, we're gonna get started. Hi everybody. I'm so excited to be welcoming you all to the second MFA reading of the semester. Tonight we have three really wonderful, talented writers who are going to be reading for us, and they are, in the order, Elise Houcek, Marie Burns, and PJ Lombardo. I wish we could have been able to do this in person rather than over Zoom, but I'm so happy to see everybody here. And to just get started, I'm going to kick it off by introducing Valerie, who will be introducing Elise.
Thanks, Jillian, for hosting, and thanks everyone for coming to the reading. Elise Husick brings her readers to the mundane, excavating the absurdity of normal and turning it into art. In her work, we meet a Zumba instructor and a red-headed young adult novelist. We overhear conversations among the patrons of a fruit factory, where overheard dialogue seems to be a source of power and discovery for her poetry. All of the characters or places exist on paper as a poem or a prose piece, but within the shape of the text, and in Elise's performative inclination, we find that these works are palimpsest, layering language and photography, music, and the stage of a theater. Performance and dialogue take the whole world as a stage, and her readers are an immersed audience, caught swimming in the thick of it. Yet, the presence of each piece on the scene is focused and contained. Every word in her succinctly crafted lines are essential to the world she is crafting. Elise can find the elasticity of a word, inflate it, and in the same sentence, with a pinprick, send it whizzing into another room, one it has not entered before. This, I believe, is a mastery of language. She writes, 3 people approach a tree from 3 different angles, forming the shape of a T. They ask its possibilities. When reading her poems, I become 3 people, and language becomes a tree with an infinite number of possibilities. Her poems are a mirror that show me the realities of my own misunderstanding. They ask me to surrender to the exposure of myself embodied in the reflections of her work. I've been abandoned and left to wash the penny sulfur from my hands. Her words, not mine. Elise's poetry rejects reason, and in that way it opens. The logic that drives her work thrives on the conversations between humor, playfulness, and the alloyed reality of what it means to logic to be human. By reading her work, we can learn to let go of what we think we know about ourselves, about poetry and art, and about the world. Elise Husick is a writer and artist from the north suburbs of Chicago. Her work has appeared or is forthcoming in Prelude, Afternoon Visitor, Always Crashing, and Guest House. I'm very excited, and we're in for a treat. Please help me in welcoming Elise.
Thank you so much, Valerie. That was really awesome. So I kind of wanted to do something a little bit different for this reading. So I made a recording, and hopefully this will work, but I was going to just send the link in the Zoom chat, and then you can just click on it and hear the work that way. Hopefully that works.
The Zumba assistant most critical of the people he is closest to won't mind the light that shushes flowers shared but shore-reaped flame. So then I moved that flame of light to be nearer to its head, washed my hands to rid the penny sulfur from my hands. I closed my eyes. Eternal suffering doled out to the vested and the tired of us. It's a neon with the rope. From error is born my deepest compassion. It moves like a chef bursting into song, his vibrato reaching toward the heavens. My meat's an egg, my meat's a potato, my meat's singing across from me. That is why I am terrified to start the process, because I know it's so beautiful, it's going to hurt. I know you love a good candle snuffer, or as we say, those fleshly flowers. Sleeping in the fort again after the lurid night. The rain has not ceased, though I'm finalizing the bulbs in my pitcher. I won't tuck your toes in individually anymore for the weight to distribute. You thought my name was Kiki. I was just oily. When you look at me, it is like a joke spinning in two directions, or the fear of death. On the one hand, I can turn my face into a string of pearls in goose or swan shape. On the other, you can be bad and mysterious. Through the perfection of benoticement, we hear a thought. She doesn't know of her disease, and it was a magic calendar with list messages. And this is the last I heard. Spinnerets waved goodbye from across the green paneling as I waved goodbye to my carrot. I checked my watch. 4 times? No. Other reasons this could be happening. Christening myself both sexual and stupid, I pour wax on myself, become the fire of the present. Then I wrote it down. Meow, hush, meow, hush, meow, hush, meow. Everything I wrote became as a note that made the world go. I could see far ahead of me one of the main performers. He looked like a yellow bird. Natural mood, unnatural imagery. Little chipmunk rises from his hole, pauses, his little back breathing up against a piece of sandpaper or cloth. We think, certainly some kind of medical gauze or slip of bodily fluids, but perhaps also his door. His frozenness outside his door might actually have nothing to do with the fear of what he sees, me, but with the necessary bee in my hair, solar recharging of morning, important to all chipmunks after they faded out of adolescence, when the terse air of morning unsubtracts one's memory into the skin and revives the glass eye slick with a dewy film. I often unsubtract one's memory as I go, without any kind of planning or forewarning, though this is not recommended. Any improvisational quality applied to something too weak or unbounded, such as a chipmunk drinking in the morning light, can have disastrous impacts that radiate, or better, maybe echolocate, through one's unsubtracted memory into reaches of the universe wholly unknown to thee. In that unreached planet, someone may not be drinking in the air through their morning skin or watching woodland creatures do it necessarily, and certainly not with the door like a bloody gauze. But still there may be that same feeling of perversity, of seeing something one ought not see, and of trading that in for the light. In other words, the background might still have a green tint to it. There might still be leaves, dead and alive, and air, and a sense of morning. Yet the air holds place for the green night, who, Though still watching, does not unsubtract his journey each new day, but journeys right on into it, with only a vague sense of anything that could even be unsubtracted, felt only as a kind of after-image of his gesture of dressing, the ghost behind his motion when he puts on his green socks. This is now where Hegel approached, and though my love for him was unequaled, I could not look at his face. He was carrying a wooden doll and wanted to take my childhood from me. Check out Konoya. Move along now, I'd say. Move along. Talking to myself, not of me. My work actually a minor phrase when compared to the necessity of moving things, not of the literati. Things entirely grocery, material, food, meat, objective, not of me. Thought of me would like to plug, but again, it's not my phrases we are here to move along. It's fruit to the customers. One by one, bananas slide up against the black plastic tarmac. The banana thinking, this feels slightly like home, slightly like the fruit factory, whereon my friends and I were starstruck daily by the conveyor belts and metal tubes, though its loss is being separated from its rental home. Never mind. I do not think it. These are exactly the kind of thoughts that send me thinking past the other conveyor belts of me, not of the factory, and into the employee lounge, whereupon I cannot sit but am caught eternally, pacing back and forth, merely looking at the chair while my boss and manager shout across the room about my condition, my invariably footed mouth, which occasionally interrupts at a customer, bringing them down. It went down. How are you this day? Yea or frown? Say, yea. That's at least a light I can handle. Well, you don't say. Say, offended. Meagerly you rope my groceries, and meagerly you bag them up. A tote dumb temperament I attribute to your pup. Leave my children out of this. I decide who I pay and how. And believe me, though I am a grocery dealer, I have no problem with who to pay and how. That means pay, money handed out. Say, money handed out. I'll speak before I figure out the rate, and you look like someone who would know this, judging by the pin of your brain prion that's on your breast and your Pinterest, surely. Manager? But you see, I didn't bring them down. We were, for a moment, sort of dancing together, moving along, especially when they said that thing about my pin and my pants, which was true. And we had this moment of relation. All these things are what I thought as I paced back and forth in the employee spot, where again I'm bolted by this paranoia that what had aired was good. Although this could be a product of my raising, a little attention that went my little self a long way, and made it so that I would always search for this, and always be unclear. Then again, I could in no way be bolted or inspired when I think about the tautology of the bananas situation. That random that got me here. His hair was red. Today I met someone who was trying to write a young adult novel, and I tried my best not to make any immediate judgments about what he is like as a person. There's very little I can tell you about him other than that his hair is red, and he employs a particular method when he writes. The method is not particularly interesting or inspired, but I have found works a genuine trick on the mind, which, though initially appearing a detriment, ultimately serves as a great benefit to the writer. Here is just one of the benefits of modern dating. This man, we'll call him YA, only writes in his journal at the exact moment that he feels he is the age to appeal to young adult readers, that he is in the exact mental state equivalent to that of a young adult. And thus all of his ideas are entirely inspired and entirely true. There is only one problem, and that is that he loses all inspiration by the sheer habit of the act, which moves in a diagonal line, crossing out the true youthfulness of his pen. The true youthfulness of his pen. I used to stay up into the early hours while he was writing so I could smell it, adorned with the lingering scent of fern stem and musk. I would go down on the true youthfulness of his pen with such tenderness and vigor that I could picture a movie being made about it. And people actually did come out and start filming the story of YA and his wife. Isn't that what I was? Though at times it seemed like he was cutting me too, crossing out the true youthfulness of my life every time we made love in the exact moment. So I started watching us from above, which turned out to be good for the art too. What ring the globe? T. Are you on the mend? M. In future societies, they would not have considered weaving a viable metaphor, as by then they would have become textile. T. Yeah, that's why I'm talking to you quick here in an abbreviated fashion. Firstly, they will not discover it. Secondly, I have this absence form to fill out. What time, Miss Teacher, can we do that very unspecified right thing that you said we were going to do yesterday? T. Yesterday is gone and I had nothing to do with it. I can take this under my wing, where I keep various spices. Perhaps the cardamom would work on you, though it's surprising that your lungs seem to be flapping out of their respective corsicles, and this I will admit troubles my application. T. A rough, circuitous process for a very simple ouch. You see, I'm only filtering the times, yeah? C. Take my copy. There's the boxes right next to the bougies. You can check them off. T. I would recommend not trying that on me. That paper was spent by my neighbor, and he's got a penchant for bric-a-brac milking. Bric-a-brac milking, which was started in the medieval after Isidore's Natures. It is thus the return of the good to the human, and the bountiful to the stature. T. As are you, standing with your two parts remaining outward toward the sun, like the fish were trotting in their bowl on the foam, pacing two bulbous glints upward to be praised or burned. Let's take out our corsicles and flip to the 5,790th page. Though I know, you are tempted to lick it, we must let the red ones roast in the sun, as they too we must see as joining the fabric. We see on the 5,790th page, the author, Isidore, mentions something about the bountiful stature of the fish trotting in the bowl, which he likewise calls the globe, seeing that the rotation or the flotation mustn't speak without their synonym. Why is it? Because the sun forgets its monument, the people are the same? T. Wrong. Because there never was anything to mend. It was, as they say, a false application of a tent, incorrectly posted. He burned it up, but by the end his eyes really did go bad.
Does everybody finish the video? Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Elise. That was wonderful. So we just finished Elise Houcek. So next, I will be introducing Jasmine, who will be introducing our next reader.
Okay. All right. So, sorry. It's such a privilege to introduce to you our second reader for tonight. She's one of those writers that can do things in such a way that makes other writers stop and think, question their own abilities, create a small twang of healthy writer jealousy that all us writers know and feel. It's a good thing. Her writing is the type of writing that makes us listen, captures us, and then subsequently makes us want to go and write on our own. It's a tangle of ethereal beauty and a thing with floating doors and fearsome warriors and otherworldly beings glittering with a gorgeously sinister vulnerability. In the time we've had at Notre Dame, she's become a good friend. We often, as worried, anxious people tend to do, discuss how much we do not know. We discuss this quite frequently. We'll send each other frantic messages, and her responses work quickly, easing my worried pain. She mentioned this when she did me the honor of introducing me at our last reading. She said something complimentary about my empathy. In truth, though, those worried messages usually come from me first. They're frantic, hurried, sometimes too direct, that if they were sent to anyone else, they might be considered slightly outside of the proper realms of texting decorum. but she always knows. She knows exactly what to say. Essentially, what I mean to tell you in all my abstract musing is that Marie knows more than even she knows she sees herself as knowing. Her writing proves this. It is strong and powerful and makes you listen, all while accomplishing the hefty task of literary transport. So as you sit and listen, watch. You won't you won't know it until she's finished. You won't even feel it happening. You won't see the sentences come off the page, engulf you, twist around you in sharp tendrils of foggy blues and translucent grays. You won't understand just how much work her words do until she's done, and you wake slowly from her quick but delicate literary haze. Her words, in short, will entrap you. They'll have taken you to a different space, a different time outside of normally explored imaginary landscapes. And so, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Marie Burns.
That was very nice. Thank you, Jasmine. And hopefully I live up to that. That was really, I really appreciate it. And that was, it's just beautiful. I think I'm gonna read just the beginning of my thesis. So that's all right. Okay. The portal, when it came, simply appeared. There was no warning, no change in atmospheric pressure. One moment, empty, barren land. The next, a tall, slim fissure, unzipping itself a few inches above the ground, reaching with every passing moment upwards into the azure sky until its height was indiscernible with the ivory clouds. Pellucid mist fluttered near the edges, its body colorless and numb, a chilling blip, a slender shaft opening like an envelope, and a woman whose body slid from the portal's mouth like water. She didn't seem to walk out, but glide, coasting on air before landing a few steps away from her entrance. The air next to the fissure fizzled as the portal assessed this new absence. It blinked, splitting into multifractal halves before shedding swiftly, the only trace of its existence, a small clear seam that soon vanished with a snap. The actual act of transition, corporeal adjustment, only ever took a few beats, but it often struck her as strange how muted her entrance felt, how muffled her boots were on land, both unrecognizable and familiar because of its strangeness. The lone woman studied the land. She had never traveled to this place before, though perhaps place was inadequate. She often had a hard time articulating location. From where she stood, the world seemed all at once a vast and level plate, grizzled by dried vegetation and dips dug into the soil just barely. Where once bustling hills and sheer bluffs crowded the low plain, now there were only wrinkled depressions and the otherwise flat wasteland, squat ridges whirling in circular grooves, small humped furrows pressed and printed like one large puckered fingerprint. In the distance, a few sharp points rose to her right, indicating a coiled mountain range curving inward, a primeval claw crouching against the sunset. Above, the ceiling of low cumulus clouds seemed to bubble, rolling in the rising dust, whisked in bronze and deep brown. A quiet picture of planetary fury. She squinted, then started walking. Really, she wasn't supposed to be here. Not this soon, and certainly not alone. Winged creatures flocked above her. They were young things, barely a couple weeks old, whose wings resembled brittle bone over thin tan gauze. Too far away for her to properly discern their features, but still noticeably hungry, their dark misshapen silhouettes were a shadowy mix of clawed feet and squashed muzzle. She didn't have much of choice, though, seeing as her kind was disappearing, vanishing, ceasing, or perhaps, as some theories put it, simply dematerializing. Still the same thing. Perhaps it was a blessing that she hadn't ever known too many of the others. They were a hermit-like bunch, after all. A screech pierced the heat. They were like twisted pups flying above, whining for supper. Her stride was a quick affair. Pebbled mud and weeds cracked under her boots as she made her way through the desolate expanse. The tallest plants were hoary shrubs that reached to her calves, their bristling branches caked with mysterious powdery grime. A scent carried through the air, acrid, hints of hazy singe and fire. There must have been an extraordinary stretch of fire here, enough to rage the entire plain she crossed and more. What had the report said again? She barely read it at the time. Usually a minimal glance did it for her. She just needed to find those stairs and be on her way. Still, a land this desolate. Normally, she traveled with a partner, someone with access to another portal should the Watchers fail to retrieve a road tarot on their own. It happened more than anyone would like to admit. No matter. She just had to find the gate, bait the tear, and the rest would follow. Not much possibility of error there. She had been on the job once since, well, before her folks went under the contract with the following. Watchers had always kept an eye on road tiers, with or without the following's meddling. They just hadn't been as organized, that's all. Light surged in front of her, scouring the land's surface with feverish pitched heat. It seemed almost obscene, a hot mouth swallowing the edge of a land that had long since forgotten age or era. She wiped a hand across her forehead. Weather was always a shock, regardless of where she traveled. The following liked to keep their hubs cool, their center close to the coldest temperature a being can withstand, with some room allowed for those not of the same world as theirs. Though empty space has no real quantitative warmth or frigidity, the following stay faithful to their origin the only way they can. An icy interior, rigid walkways, frozen beams, rooms that numbed your nose and feet. Invigoratingly refreshing was the slogan, or chilly and crispy. When she laughed, it came out as a bark, stale and brittle. She gazed back to the mountains in the distance, imagining their blustering height, peaks cutting the heavy air. Something arose in her, a feeling of remembrance. She started. The memory fell through, but she could have sworn. A ghostly figure rose in front of her, wisps of dust condensing to form a small child, and then the figure collapsed almost as soon as its outline finished forming. Her skin prickled with sweat. She hadn't pulled a recollection in so long, she thought she had lost the ability. Ironic how Watchers manipulated memory, but couldn't remember their own. Not traditionally speaking. And it wasn't due to any outside force, no telling signs of tinkering. If there had been, it would have been obvious the moment she tried to recall. The woman grimaced. Her side cramped, throbbing around a scar. It hadn't fully recovered, but with everyone on high alert, she didn't have much of a choice. It wasn't too unusual for Watchers to skip a call every now and then, but whole pockets of them vanishing one after the other, without any record or signal, was concerning. The speculation had been divided. Rebellion or something worse. Stiff clouds of heat rose from the cracked ground, coughing from the deep, grimy walls of the sooty lung. She waved a hand, clearing the smoky steam. Of course, a hunting would mean that they were on their own. The relationship with the falling was precarious at best, knowing they were just as capable of breaking their packs as they were keeping them. When you could bend memory, you didn't much care for those who would enforce it. Another puff of heat escaped below her and she paused. No, it wasn't one of those planets. She continued carefully, pausing every couple of steps. No one below the 5th rank was allowed on retrieval excursions, though with the rate their numbers were decreasing, that too was being questioned. Their caste was a power-hungry bunch, and it probably wasn't by accident that she was chosen to pick up where the other Watchers ostensibly failed or died horribly. She didn't think too long about what the latter meant. A ripple of warmth swelled from the ground again, catching a part of her left hand. She snatched it back and moved faster across the land. Her breath hadn't quickened, not yet, but it was close. Emotions to her resembled tightly woven nets, each knotted with a different lock. There wasn't so much a delicacy to their workings as a deliberation, a conscious consideration of stimuli. It wouldn't benefit her to panic. A sharp scream pierced the air and she grabbed her blade, bending at the knees. Its two-pronged blade almost blinded her, reflecting the sun's glare. Nothing. A louder call answered from behind and she rolled around. It was hard to tell these days if her senses were becoming duller or so heightened that even a soft croon would make her jump. She remained still, surveying her surroundings. A slight stir moved in front of her, but it was so distant she couldn't tell the size. Probably something mating. It was the season, right? For mating. Did creatures here follow a seasonal copulation period here? She frowned. This kind of information was probably listed in the report as well. Dust, if this wasn't the most damned world she'd visited. Better finish this quick. She sheathed her blade across her back and turned around. In front of her, the sunlight died. Wherever she went, the second evening sun always felt the brightest when it fell, a burning eye in a glowing grave. But darkness acted quick, creeping from the corners, inklings of the unfathomable, tasting the sun's burnt trail. Now that she considered it, she was having trouble keeping up with the signposts. That mountain ridge was one, but she had lost track of the other, one shrub standing straight amongst the limp flock of plants. Orienting herself was a struggle she rarely confided in others. Better to run a course blind than run a course endangered, known. A dense layer of dust rose as night crept in, spitting from the ground in showers of ash and cinder. Miniature pores opened in the dirt. Only a thin ray of pallid yellow streamed from the dying star now, and she had to stare at the small explosions of dust for a few moments to properly decipher the phenomenon. They were exhalations. In languid succession, sprays of anemic ember wheezed from below, misting and violet coughs, torn from some giant torso bleeding out underneath the crackling surface. Hushed skin pulling apart as ash billowed up in small powerful blows, closing then reopening somewhere else. Crumbs of fire fell at the peak of their height, pulsing on the ground like burning orbs. She clenched a hand. Rogue tears were one thing, but this, they wouldn't have sent her to a living one. They wouldn't have sent any watcher here. They couldn't have, or they shouldn't have. Unbidden, as if answering a tremendous call, her breath sped up. It had been a long time since she had felt apprehension. She had almost forgotten the slow build of quiet misgiving, the way a pulse can jump and seize, grasp for bloody purchase. And underneath it all, in creeping fashion, came a glimmer of fascination, something urging her to look, examine what lurked in front of her, knots slowly loosening in the net. She ignored it. The woman ran through the puffs of malodorous breath, jumping through their steamy fog, skipping to the side whenever a particularly large aperture opened below. It was after she finally stopped to reorient herself that she noticed the pattern. Beneath her feet was a circle cleared of all soil, revealing battered rock underneath, carved lines, thin and rigid, crossed in two thin crescent formations. A braided circle of rubble enclosed the symbols, projecting a protective air about the image itself. She had found the gate, but the tears were nowhere to be found, hiding, no doubt, somewhere nearby. Gaps in space were liable to appear near their birthing spots, and rogue ones were no different. She closed her eyes, crouching down. Broken folds of stone and sand slipped through her fingers. The engraved rock wasn't so much a solid surface as it was a mosaic of multicolored gravel, freezing to the touch. An old gate, then. It had been a while since she had felt an original. A large gust of steam and ash burst at her side, and she flinched. Right. She didn't know how much of that she could take, let alone attempt another run. Not knowing their exact material, she would have to call them on her to her then. She concentrated, feeling the gate's cool rocks, recalling. Slowly the stones stirred, knocking it against their sides, grinding to a subtle shifting purr. Sleep had dulled their minds, but one by one they remembered another world, responding to her touch. Then they fizzled inwards, disappearing in a hole gathering in the middle. Gradually the hole thickened, widening to a whirling vortex. All she could hear now was the quiet clink of pebble against pebble as they ran downwards like miniature waterfalls. She waited. A thin mark appeared to her immediate left. And then I have illustrations, but I'll just end there.
Thank you so much, Marie. That was wonderful. And so I will be introducing our last introducer, Rebecca Gearhart.
I'm so excited to be introducing PJ tonight. PJ, one of my very best friends. PJ's poetry speaks to the Anthropocene under duress. Reading his work, we are accosted by an onslaught of sick, weeping imagery. Things melt and break apart and evolve under the pressures of desperation. The landscape is purely American, where everything is synthesized from trash and nothing, pockmarked by apparitions of sandboxes and leftover sloshing steaks and nosediving violet skies. PJ is doing more than recording images, though. His poetry changes language on a foundational level. Words break apart and come together in violent collision. The language procreates, and the poems are a breeding ground for the new way of writing and reading and talking. They have sonic ingenuity. The work changes in your mouth and your head. It drags the reader into the grotesque, the indulgent, and the shattered. PJ has written a new kind of America. PJ was one of the first people I met when I moved out here, and one of the things that has always struck me about his working style is the remarkable way he interacts with the world, synthesizing everything he encounters into his work. Whether he is studying French or critical theory or movies or any number of incredibly challenging things he chooses to spend his limited free time pursuing, it's all part of a larger conversation for him, the conversation that propels his multifaceted poetic body of work forward. These poems have appeared in Proteon, Dream Pop Journal, and Homintern. The strength of his writing would be enough of a contribution to the MFA program, but he's also a generous reader for his peers, an involved member of our literary community, an awesome artist, a fellow East Coaster, and a really great friend. Please join me in welcoming PJ Lombardo.
Rebecca, I am so appreciative for that introduction. That was really super beautiful. Thank you so much. So my reading is going to be a little bit short because I'm incredibly nervous and I hate talking into a Zoom camera. But I'm going to do it a little different. So last time I read from a more polished series that I planned on including. Can everybody hear me at this volume? Is my word cool? So last time I read from a more polished series that I planned on including in a book. This time I'm mostly going to read out of my notebook for this like longer form companion piece that I'm working on for that collection. So, but I'm going to start off before I do that with a quote from Antonin Artaud, The Theater and Its Double, The Alchemical Theater. All true alchemists know that the alchemical symbol is a mirage as the theater is a mirage. And this perpetual allusion to the materials and the principle of the theater found in almost all alchemical books should be understood as the expression of an identity of which all alchemists are extremely aware, existing between the world in which the characters, objects, images, and in a general way, all that constitutes the virtual reality of the theater develops, and the purely fictitious and illusory world in which the symbols of alchemy are evolved. So the poem's called Rat King 9.2 Billion Alchemical Derelicts for South Bend, Indiana. Let me drink some water first. Delve, delve, bastard planet, your balloons on hemorrhage, appetite of ape legions surges through your skyline. Unwitting Uzis from Jersey, you know, I don't mind when you babble. Never's a bother, I disin to great, pull up clouds like smash beer, shrill second stretching through the late night. If ever was a cocoon, this chemist's caught. What a trip, they holler in cash, gel on my eyes, I'm key incinerator, mealing copper soda through the heartbeat crease down my ass. I hate arts, they all slop my ash in dreams. Walls I detest in Chicago, je deteste. In Indiana, I'm crab walking in Ohio, withdrawing sunglasses, bitter licorice wrists, limp in backseat stretcher. That's right, voluptuous hills, coughing out shells, rotten notes. Afford me, I'm cheaper than gas, cheaper than the lithium floating down my apartment. Rowboats racked, slight as a towel, hung from the doorknob of a fucking neighbor. Flower Christ of many masks, for this I cheer, I knuckle walk. Because light hides, because rhinos nearly zilch, because I drank rum in the dressing room, pissed across the studio. Because hop off, bud, quit stopping by. I'm pin-up toast batteries riddled with rust, wiring a witch's fingernails, droid slum stuffed with my face. Blue light, blue light, red light, light blue, red light, 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 lights, 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 light, light, burrowing into the paste knot of my opal scarf. Marble gnarls in my breath, aw shit, guess they win, whatsoever. I think all teeth's perfect. No edicts, Midwest pushing patches, painting sprays, strangling cocks with chipped polished tutu, pretty my toes. Sense my shiver in Dairyland, cheese hunks glory, pain between my sternum and my heart. Mon queue, wriggles lit pussing Villanelle. Rural jingle, my keys, fanged lakes, hopping out, double-jointed placenta with a mustache, fuming, je déteste la police. J'ai le moral, la police. Unscrewed liver, corpse in the trunk, inside every engine, tweakers, sugar rags all foaming. They will hear us drool inside their holly. They will hear us drool with mammoth tumult. They will hear us drool, lead avalanche. They hear drool, we pummel bars, we pummel graffiti. We dance under a bridge, tunnel gone Ferris wheel. In my head are tombs, that's pretty whack. I eat raw dough, spiral in the park, shiv the flags, defenestrate lamps, pluck astroturf, hug the manholes, drown, little death on the sidewalk, crouch my deck and think and daughter. I daughter, I think, I curve my knuckle towards the granite, heavy recur, wisps across my tilted nose. Is this shit how a robot nods? Icy eye slam plumber into still pipes like I daughter, I think, and curve my knuckle. If ever trailed some slither, it's mine, tail still, wet Atlantic wisps up my tilted nose. But barbed bats disembodied swing, shuffling shallow, horizon and slinky, daughter thought I coursed my knuckle. Artillery belts full on, yogurt cotton, stiff soft, some showering finches, wisp their tails down my tilted polyps. I shoot fecal with passing pelts, hound the tender for camels. Je marche difficilement, avec un idée dans mon nez. Simmer to boil, pennies get pushed, get plopped. Weasel off, bastard planet, all's I requisite. Nook to bum, fires to farm. Peaches to prince, locksmith, putty, sloshing. Tumble, like thimble, snuck exit to larynx. Goddamn dog, knock off, I'm levitating. Biking squares without a Xanax, masticating. Now's when I tell this poem's about, yeah, because that's my favorite, says the gendarme, says the money, 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 says the money. Eek! Buddy, I'm pumping, I'm faking, lashing out cartwheels because that power's out fuming itself blind, castles of brick road, potholes, glass alleys, blue Indiana crosswalks. Everybody's a shit angel, boomed flat beneath bells. Cyber dust I want to swallow, forsaken moles with ghosts of trees, rocketing through sheets of sap of corn, sticky as the day we popped out, sticky as sweaty pills and prior noses. Oui, la maison est en face, so let's knife up the drywall for zebra skin. We plummet escapes, tangled duct tape shoeless from pinprick Venus, humming blurry as a threat. We wicker chair fling in siege, planes gurgling pepper and lace, and we have heard their callings under night, heard their orchards morose wrestle, heard their squeals of tire, silencer. Eternity cluttered I miss for we, I sketch for we, retaliation, skeleton keys. If a carrot rocks the diaphragm tonight, we'd not mind, and if a whistle halted every wheel and every chest, I'd find you in the afterplanet, whittling diamond into cannon. I'd scope through maze bleu, townhouses, dives lié, dans l'allier, middle finger tinted apple cataracts. Find a possum's gaggle, swirling down dewy low, pinch it rose, welt its gut, drag the bruise on jet overhead. That's over my head, I say. They buckle patrol, my fever's crest, but I said, fumble immaculate trunk of dress, caterwauling mascara drenched. Bonjour, me is my blade, mewing cantankerous, wound up in my toes like sand. Dude, guess I'm sticky round, pounding soda against my cheeks. Prescient syrup nap, dozing, and though them imps prick my lobe, time and them, I wag my legs, steady as a Taurus, rolling smiley at carpet muck, throbbing weighty twirl of antler. Bonjour, me, it never matter, loose as sprinter, decays the splinter. Frankly, bonjour, me, fuck that camera, we rupturing cartilage, in pustules of dazzling, leaking bodies down my chin, then crime like heaps of rubber fizzling up. Nuclear potato wedge in their eye. Whatsoever they say, circlers, long as I'm stooping, juice packed behind my lip, sparking hazardous, left to mill, leisure swept diving. Je déteste l'art. scowling ajar from beyond the suction cups, the erasers, the mule whips, the zip ties. But if all this slides two-tongued patois, you'll rattle out another oak. I'll keep the ladder locked, laced. And if the melt ribs my posy to a paste, it's better off obliteration every's way. And if Great Lakes snub my lakes, draw my gray bath, and when, tolls jingle my purse, carving noon, flex draw, hardy nod, to roll goosewinks like water through hops, vans through tunnels, piped bloody as sun's glass. Now if I ought wander, once soups thins, if a harp claps 9.92 billion cells into concussion, I'll wind a doll at the spider webs, husk my time cigarillo wraps, soap out my pits, glare the clouds rotted, haul it wherever, build a rocket, throw some shadow, mammoth lead tumults. For burly brick, for wicked machines we, as pop, as grass, reprise, call it arson. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, PJ. That was wonderful. And thank you to Elise, Marie, and PJ, as well as our wonderful introducers. And now we can have some time if anybody has any questions. You can either type them out in the chat if you feel more comfortable like that, or just unmute yourself and say you have a question.
I have a question.
Yes.
PJ. I'm curious about your endurance process and like how you find like energy to contain and like expand these like long pieces of poetry.
I don't know. I guess I just kind of keep going until I think it's done. But I wanted this to be like a longer piece, I feel like, because I wanted it. I don't know. I definitely it's like maybe like a third of my drafts I have like a first draft like written out like on the first sitting. Like I definitely take like pretty extended breaks. I mean, this was written in like a couple days, but yeah, I don't know. I just kind of keep doing it until I get bored or find something else to do or have to twiddle my thumbs or something. That's a terrible answer. I know that's a terrible answer. I'm sorry about that, but I don't have a good one.
Thanks, PJ. Anybody else have a question?
I have a question for both poets, I guess. It's kind of more of a comment, but I guess you can listen to my comment and see if you have anything to say about it, I guess. Yeah, I think both of the poets were so musical to me. Like, PJ, there's so much like internal rhyme in what you read. And, you know, French is such like a musical language. And it was scattered with French. And even like the moments where you would kind of really linger on a word were like so pleasurable to me in a way that I didn't really think that they would be. And I don't think like that kind of repetition has been for me ever before. And it almost felt like kind of like a record skipping or getting stuck somewhere. And then Elise, yours was like, maybe also like juxtaposed with the candle and like sort of the light white noise in the background. It felt almost sort of like a really soothing kind of drone piece. But then there was this like tension of, or like layer of anxiety beneath it because of the content. So I guess just for both of you, I would be curious like how you think of sound. I guess that's such a basic question for poets, but if you could talk about that a little, I don't know.
Elise, do you want to go?
You can go if you have something you want to say. No? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, that's like everything when I'm writing shorter poems, especially. Like when I'm composing, I'm constantly like saying everything out loud. And I'm pretty like anal about it. Like I have to be like in a space where I can like only hear myself. Whereas like with prose, it's felt kind of freeing because I've been able to just, I think I'm letting go of the attention to sound, but it still comes up and I'm still using it, obviously. But yeah, with the shorter pieces, it's like so essential to the composition, and I'm constantly saying words out loud. Yeah.
I'll just say that was what was fun for me when I first started writing, was like kind of mushing up sounds when I was like, I don't know, like in, you know, middle school or whatever. Like I was really just fascinated with how you could like slur certain like sequences of letters together and it would create certain sounds, and like that was the most like fun part of like writing to me, I guess. So it's been with me since, I guess, the very beginning.
Thank you, PJ. Thank you, Elise. Before I ask for any other questions, I had a quick question for Marie. Marie, I was fascinated by like all the imagery in your piece, in like all of this and all of the tension with and the action within it. How was your writing process like for doing longer form pieces? I'm speaking from like a poet's short form perspective.
That's a good question. I kind of have a disorganized approach to writing. So, I guess in some ways, writing a longer, it was kind of freeing in some ways, just because I knew since I had like a longer space to work with, I didn't really have to worry about like sort of tightening everything up just then. I could just like, I don't know, I introduced a lot of information that I wasn't even sure how to like tie up then, but I just kind of like let myself sort of be a lot more okay with just, you know, having fun with it then, and then kind of just, you know, trusting that I'd get to it later. But I don't know if that answers your question. But yeah, I kind of have like a fragmented, I guess, approach to like writing longer stories. So I just kind of like write scenes that are interesting and then like later kind of try to like tie them back. But.
That's awesome. Thank you, Marie. Does anybody else have any other questions? If not, we can end the night here. Does that sound okay with everybody? Okay, awesome. Again, thank you all so much for coming out, and have a wonderful night. And thank you especially to our readers, Marie, Elise, and PJ. Yeah, everyone have a good night and stay safe.
Thank you, Jillian.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.